My red light is come on, so we are live for the second meeting of the legislative task force to revitalize the Vermont dairy industry. Today is June 7th, and it's now 9:01. Welcome to everybody. I'm Dan Smith, co-chair with Senator Starr. Bobby and I decided to alternate chairing the meeting, so I'm chairing today's meeting. We will begin with introductions and then hear from three witnesses to give us a detailed picture of the Vermont dairy marketplace. And I'd like to welcome the task force members. Welcome, John. Good to see you. And make sure to welcome our new member to the task force, Jackie Folsom. Welcome, Jackie. Welcome also to the agency folks that will be testifying to begin with, and to any members of the public that are in attendance by YouTube. Randy, welcome to you. Good to see you. As I think we follow the usual process before we hear from our witnesses, and begin by introducing the members of the task force, and welcome Heather. It looks like everybody is on, so I've managed to bungle along here until everybody got on, so that's good. So why don't we start with introductions, and Bobby, do you want to start?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. I'm Bobby Starr. I chair the Senate Ag Committee. I'm from Essex, Orleans County, and glad to be with you. Good morning. Michael?
Good morning. I'm Mike Marcotte, a state representative from Coventry. I am chair of House Commerce and Economic Development, and I represent Coventry, Irisburg, Newport City, Newport Town, and a part of Troy. Good morning.
Go around, Joe.
I'm Joe Bradley. I am currently retired. I was the CEO of VITA for 20 some years. And as you all, I'm sure know, we did a lot of agricultural lending. So I'm happy to be of help if I can be.
Jackie, our new member.
Morning, everyone, and thank you for the welcome. Leadership team under Governor Douglas. Retired dairy farmer with my husband, and glad to be here.
John O'Brien.
Good morning. I'm John O'Brien, state rep from Royalton and Tunbridge, and I serve on House Ag and Forestry.
Heather.
Good morning. I'm Heather Darby. I work with the University of Vermont Extension, and I'm a crops and soils specialist, and work with dairy farmers throughout the state. And also grew up on a dairy farm, which some folks know and some people don't, but okay.
You have a little person there, Heather.
Yeah, that's Flint. Remember Flint, Bobby? He's gotten really big. There he goes.
I guess he has.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Isn't that crazy?
So cute.
I'm back in his fort.
Thanks for that intro. Senator Brock.
I'm Senator Randy Brock. I represent Franklin County and part of Grand Isle County, and I'm the Senate Minority Leader.
And John Roberts.
Good morning, everybody. I'm John Roberts, Executive Director of the Champlain Valley Farmer Coalition, based in Middlebury. I live in Cornwall, hoping to leave my basement soon. I'm a retired dairy farmer, retired employee of the Agency of Ag, and somehow just can't pull the plug on retiring forever. But anyway, looking forward to working with you all.
So I'm Dan Smith. I worked for 5 years for the Legislative Council, staffing, among others, then Representative Starr's and the Senate Ag Committee. After that, I spent the better part of 10 years of my personal and professional life working on the Dairy Compact. And in the 20 odd years since then, about half of my professional time has been devoted to milk price regulation all over the country. So this is an exciting opportunity to advance that discussion. Today's we hear from 3 witnesses and basically an hour with the agency, a half hour with Agrimark, and an hour with DFA, with a break in between at 10:15. As I said at the outset, the objective is to give task force members a filled out, detailed picture of the entire Vermont dairy marketplace, from the farm to the plant and from the plant to the customer over the next couple meetings. We sent a series of questions to each of the witnesses to prime the discussion, and the committee members should have those questions in front of them as well. We will hear from Anson and members of the agency to start. Anson, we understand you have to leave at 10, but the Diane and EB and Laura can stay. So you'll be able to fill out the allotted time through to 10:15. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, and so I guess before you get started, do you have a preference with regard to making a presentation and reserving questions, or is it okay to field questions as you go along?
Yeah, I think I've got a few things I would like to, just to maybe an overview of some of the things that we are doing with dairy, with various partners and at the agency. And now also we have Diane Boffell with us, and Laura Ginsberg and E.B. Flory, and they have some of the data and some of the really detailed information that the panel was requesting. So if it's okay, I could maybe set the stage a little bit, and then we can go into more of the greater detail of what's happening on the landscape with dairy.
Okay, and if task force members, I'm fairly low tech, so if you have a question, if you could raise your hand so I can see it, and then I'll recognize you as we go along. Do any task force members have any questions or additional thoughts before we hear from Anson? Okay, Anson, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. It's great to be with you all today and offer some perspective on dairy and agriculture. Of course, the agency stands ready to help you with your work. So a couple of things, as I mentioned, Diane Boffell, Laura Ginsberg, and E.B. Flory are all with us. They are experts in dairy in various different pockets. And they're all working along with the agency on several fronts to improve the dairy economy. We'll hear more from them in just a moment. A couple of highlights, the things that are currently happening and have been underway for the last couple of years. The agency was successful in establishing the Northeast Dairy Innovation Center. This center is one of 3 in the country, the other states being Wisconsin and Tennessee. USDA chose Vermont to host this bold initiative because of our willingness to look at new ideas and to look at new strategies. This center is already returning dollars to dairy farmers and processors, making it more affordable to do business here and also growing their dairy businesses. The center came out after the agency hosted a dairy summit in Jay a few years ago. I think a number of you were at that summit. The agency went to Washington and worked with our congressional delegation in getting this center established with some long-term funding. We are in the early stages of this center, but it's already returning investments to our farmers. Laura Ginsberg is here on the line, and she'll offer some more details in a few moments. The agency and the governor and the legislature have also invested more dollars for dairy and the Working Lands program. These dollars are helping dairy farmers and processors by adding value to their products. The investments made through this program have helped with marketing and much needed infrastructure investments, making it more affordable to do business in Vermont. And again, we thank the legislature and all our partners for investing in the Working Lands program. The agency also has been working with Farm to Plate, and they have issued a series of recommendations to help dairy. This comprehensive report was released this year and looked at some of the current conditions of dairy, some of the bottlenecks, the opportunities, and also some recommendations. I would encourage this panel maybe to have some of the authors of that report come in and look at that, because they did do a deep dive on dairy farming and dairy processing and have a series of recommendations there. Outside our borders, the agency has been a strong advocate of changing the pricing system for dairy farmers. As many of you know, it's a federal system, complicated system, and the agency, along with the Vermont Milk Commission, has advocated for a growth management plan. While the support is strong in Vermont and around the region, we've had support from the Farm Bureau and several groups in other states. This approach has not garnered a national movement, but we continue to advocate for this through our partners and in Washington. And I also would highlight some of our milk handlers have also in the region have decided to establish their own growth plans, a lot of it coming because of the pandemic. And speaking of the pandemic, we can't talk about what's happening on the dairy landscape now without discussing the pandemic and what's happened over the last several months. It's no secret the food system was disrupted, just like our lives 15 months ago. Dairy faced incredible disruption. Markets wiped out overnight with the closure of coffee shops, restaurants, colleges, and institutions. With those markets evaporating, the price paid to farmers plummeted during the early months. Many in Vermont could not survive those historic low prices, and some of those markets have yet to recover. Luckily, federal and state programs helped some weather this. The agency was able to get millions of dollars to dairy farmers and dairy processors of all sizes, so they could try to recoup some of those losses. And we again appreciate the legislature's support in these relief programs. Farmers were also eligible for some federal aid that came via the Farm Services Agency through USDA. Because of this disruption and importance of dairy, the governor created a commission to look at the future of agriculture. This commission is underway. It's looking closely at the dairy industry and other pockets of agriculture in Vermont. This commission will issue a series of recommendations in November aimed at improving the dairy economy in Vermont. So there's work going on that front as well to help dairy. Dairy farmers should also closely watch what's just passed the legislature this session. Federal dollars, or the American Rescue Dollars, or ARPA as we call it, could help dairy farmers. Investments are going to be made in broadband, sewer and water, economic development, climate change, and housing. And all these areas are important to the vitality of dairy farming in Vermont. We look forward to learning more details of these programs as they're rolled out in the coming weeks and months. We also cannot talk about dairy without talking about the environment. Dairy farmers are investing their money in programs to protect and improve the environment, and it's working. The agency is also in the midst of two bold and innovative programs that return dollars to dairy farmers. Deputy Secretary Allison Eastman and a host of partners are working on a payment for ecosystems plan. This working group is in the midst of developing a plan that could pay farmers for improving soil health and also water quality. The agency was also successful in getting the attention of USDA. The agency was awarded a $7 million grant that will reward farmers for going above and beyond the current water quality regulations. Pay for phosphorus, as we call it, is an innovative performance approach that pays farmers for the pounds of phosphorus reduced by implementing conservation practices, as opposed to implementing conservation practices, as opposed to paying farmers a portion of the cost to install practice. That infrastructure costs quite high. Working closely with a number of partners, including UVM, the Vermont Land Trust, and others, it's being watched as a possible model for the nation and could help our dairy farmers tremendously down the road. These are just a few of the initiatives we are working on to improve the dairy economy. We know we don't have all the answers, and we know much, much, much more work needs to be done. Dairy farmers deserve more because of what they return to Vermont. And again, we can't thank you enough for taking up this topic, and we stand ready to help you in your deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you, Anson. And how would you like to proceed from here?
I would think we'll turn it over to Diane, Edie, and Laura Ginsburg are with us, and they have some of the data that you requested. And I will turn it over to Diane, and I think Diane maybe has some slides that with the three of them they could go through. Diane?
I
Good
guess,
morning.
do anybody have any questions for Anson before we turn things over to Diane? Yes, Jackie.
You're muted.
You're still muted, Jackie.
My little button isn't working for some reason. Thank you for the reminder. I would just like to know somewhere along the line, if we could get a reading on those WeLab grants, what kinds of grants went to dairy farmers and what they were used for. We hear, and I know you can get on the website, so possibly that might be an easier way to do that, but I would really like to know what they're going for and how the dairy farmers are using them. So that's all. Thank you.
Yeah, we can help you with that. That's great.
Anybody? And John?
Thank you. Anson, you might want to defer this to the three following you. But I just, on what you said about the growth management plan, I just wondered if there was federal support at the USDA and in Congress. I just, without getting too much into the weeds, I'd love to know what that looks like. You know, if Vermont could design national dairy policy, and I'd also like to know why the resistance from the rest of the country. Why is there no enthusiasm for that nationally?
I would say the past administration under the Trump administration was not a big fan of this. We have not had discussions yet with the new administration. They're just getting settled in Washington, and it might be an opportunity to restart those conversations with them to see where it could go.
And if I might add into that, the Farm Bureau, regional, different areas of the country have been supported from Farm Bureau for a growth management plan. There's also an organization called Dairy Together out of the Wisconsin and the Midwest, but several people are taking part in the Northeast, and they are advocating for a growth management plan as well. And they've been an advocacy group that's been working pretty tirelessly with this information and trying to move it forward. The resistance comes of don't tell me what to do. Basically, from other parts of the country, is that we have the ability to grow, we have the ability to make a lot of milk. Don't tell me to stop. So and certain administrations talk about not even socialism, communism, that, you know, managing a supply of milk in that manner is not acceptable to the mantra of capitalism. And if you can make it go, and if you can't, that's too bad. And so our congressional delegation from Vermont is interested and willing to discuss further, but it's a hard sell for the rest of the country in some areas. But the grassroots is certainly continuing to have these conversations, and it's hopeful, but it's still not. The pandemic derailed a lot of stuff last year. So hopefully with the new administration, there may be some renewed interest.
Diane, it's Joe Bradley. Would it be the case, and I probably should know this, but I don't, that the farms in the Midwest and the West are in not as much financial trouble because they're larger, and so they are doing okay?
I think there's certainly an economy of scale the larger you get, and farming in the Midwest with their ability to grow more of their own crops, especially
Right.
grains, is certainly a difference. There's some pressures, some interesting pressures of feed cost, especially California with drought. They've had some very large dairies, and now it's very hard to find feed, and feed costs are much higher. So, but the interest in the Midwest is coming from smaller well, the 200-300 cow farms and smaller. So it's
Makes
not the 30 and it is the 30 and 40 cow farms in the Midwest, but also up into a larger scale of they're having issues making ends meet as well. And so there's more interest than in the past. And I had a long phone call with a farmer from California who just couldn't understand why his cooperative would sell excess milk into the export powder market when the prices were so bad, and thought that, and stating that was such a good thing for their company. He was an executive from, I don't know, the oil industry, and bought a farm and just couldn't understand their math at all of why this was such a good market for them.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Okay.
Dan,
Yeah. Yes, Bobby.
I have a few questions for Anson, but I would expect that Diane or one of the other members of the team would give us the numbers that I think we need as a task force to be able to figure out where our losses are and where we could make changes to make things better. So I'll reserve my questions for after we hear from some of the presenters.
Okay, I just suggest, Bobby, keep in mind that Anson's going to leave at 10. So if it rolls along and you still have your questions before he's ready to go, you might want to chime in then.
Yeah,
Okay.
appreciate it.
Okay, Anson, you turn it over to Diane and go from there.
All right. Yeah. Diane, go ahead.
All right, I'm going to share my screen. And get there in just a second. Okay, from the beginning. All right, there we go. Everybody, I can see you. You can see the screen. All right, the data that you requested. You asked us the following questions and to provide this following data. Updating the task force on the status, comparing 2000, 2010 to present, and present is 2020. For us, number of farms by size, total number of farms participating in the federal order and those that are not participating, number of cows in the state, and then a lot of production averages per farm, average per cow, the primary plants where milk is being shipped to or used in Vermont, total capacity of in-state plants, total use of Vermont raw milk, and how much milk is being imported into Vermont to these plants from other states. So we'll go through that data. There is a lot here. We will do some tag teaming. I'll do a few, EB will do a few, and Laura will do a few. So I am going to start you off with, this is the number of farms by farm size and the total. We did not, so going back to the year 2000, we had 7 and these are the water quality permits, LFO being for greater 700 and up number of milking cows needs an LFO permit. A medium farm operation permit is between 200 to 699 milking cows, and a small farm operation is under 200. So back in the year 2000, the MFO and the SFO permitting did not exist. So we had 7 permitted LFOs in the year 2000. Utilizing USDA numbers, we can come to 217 farms that were in the MFO size category. And then for the small farm operations, 1,345 for a grand total of 1,569 farms in the year 2000. 2010, 18 LFOs. The medium farm operation permits existed then for 148 of those farms, and 830 farms in the small farm operation category, for a grand total of 996 farms. 2020, 35 LFOs, 100 MFOs, and the certified small farm operation came into being in 2017, and that is 50 to 200 milking cows. So 198 certified small farms in the year 2020 out of the 501 total in the small farm category for 636 farms in 2020. So certainly a decline in the number of farms, and also showing that the growth to those that are over 700 cows, some moderation in the MFO, certainly loss there. So that middle being squeezed, either going up to an LFO or exiting the business. And then the small farm category continues to decline. So in the, this is the information on the number of farms that are indicated in the federal milk marketing order number 1 that covers the New England states except Maine, a portion of New York State, a portion of Pennsylvania, all of New Jersey, and a portion of a little portion of Maryland. So they do report this. Their dairy farm numbers for the state of Vermont, and also the dairy section. E.B. Flory keeps track of the number of dairy farms. She was not with us until after 2010, but the data does exist. And this is for cows only. We also count sheep and goats, but that is not, excuse me, included in these numbers. So in the year 2000, the federal order said 1,549 dairy farms in Vermont shipped into the federal order. Excuse me, the count for the dairy section was 1,569, a difference of 20. I'm sorry to say that we could not find any data at the agency for what those 20 farms were. I wasn't at the agency. E.B. Flory, Laura Ginsburg, none of us were at the agency. We couldn't find any data to say what those 20 farms were. We can speculate, but we don't have data for it. In 2010, the federal order showed 978 farms shipping in to the federal order, and the dairy farm count at the agency, 1,037. 59, we know a difference of 59. We do know there was some growth in on-farm processing at that point, but we still don't have real solid data to indicate every one of those farms. In the year 2020, 5,537 farms shipping into the federal order, count of 636 for the agency, 99 difference there. And we do have data that says we had, we can indicate and verify 71 out of the 99. So 13 raw milk shippers. So raw milk being they sell raw milk at the farm. Tier 2 have to come in and register with us. If they're a tier 1 raw milk producer, we don't have a count of them. We have no idea because there's no registration. There's no required interaction with them unless we find them, and then we'll inspect them. And then there were 58 on-farm processors, meaning they milk an animal and they make a product. And some of that may include goat farms. So it's not we're not able to indicate and determine all 99 of those farms. So we don't have data that would indicate every one of those farms.
But that's all dairy, right?
The numbers in the table are all cows. The number saying in 2020 there were 71. We can find 71 13 raw milk cow milk dairies and 58 on-farm processors, but that 58 may include some goat dairies or sheep. So we can't verify those differences. We can't verify the numbers of 20 farms in 2000, 59 farms in 2010, and 99 farms in 2020. We don't have the data to verify exactly who what those farms are.
Do we know the amount of milk that
No. We wouldn't, for the difference, no, we would not know that. If we can't verify who they are, we can't verify the pounds for those who are not. We have a count of them, but they're not shipping into the federal order. If we don't know who they are, then we can't determine the pounds.
But they must be very small farms if they're not in the federal order, right?
Probably. There is certainly, they could be on farm making their own product from their milk and not interacting in the federal order. We have some on-farm processors now that milk their own animals, but buy in some other milk directly, and they have some reporting requirements into the federal order. But we can't get to the data for all of them. We can pick off here and there some numbers, but we can't tell you exactly who that 20 were in 2000, 59 were in 2010, or the 99 in 2020.
Yeah.
Okay, data. The number of cows in the state, the amount of production, totals, average per farm, average per cow. USDA is our source for cow numbers and milk pounds. We utilize the dairy section count for the number of dairy cow farms. And then it's just a calculation for milk per farm, milk per cow, and cows per farm. So taking a look at that, you can certainly see some changes. In the year 2000, USDA showed we had 159,417 milking cows, producing 2.788 billion pounds of milk. The dairy section showed we had 1,569 cows. Simple average milk per farm, 1.776 million. Milk per cow, 17,489. Cows per farm, 102. 2010, cow numbers dropped to 136,667. Milk pounds, 2.520 billion. Dairy section count, 1,037 farms. Milk per farm, 2.4 million. Milk per cow, 18,436. And the average number of cows per farm, 132. 2020, USD average 119,667 milking dairy cows, 2.6 billion pounds of milk, 636 farms, a quick jump to 7.1 million, 7.2 million pounds of milk per farm, 21,474 milk per cow, and 188 on average cows per farm. So some pretty rapid changes there in a 10-year span from 2.4 million to 7.1 million pounds of milk per farm.
Diane, of the 636 farms that are included, almost 100 of them are the non-pool producers. Is that right?
That would not be included in these pounds. Correct. These are all USDA pounds. So I still believe that USDA gets their pounds numbers not from the federal order, but from their surveys of producers, from the National Agricultural Statistics Service data. They do surveys. I don't believe they use the federal order numbers. So these numbers are from the NAS survey, not from the federal order.
But we've got 100 included in there that are really small, right? However, and there might even be some goat farms in there too.
This data is only cows.
Well, but the dairy section number of farms
is only cows. We have 46 goat farms on top of that 636.
Can you go back to the previous slide? So you got 99 in that 636
is only cows.
But you said of the 58 on farm, that it's just independent. That number is just independent.
Correct.
Okay.
So they use all the federal milk market order numbers except for cow numbers, and then they go to some other statistical record?
No, the USDA, different beings, different organizations. The National Agricultural Statistics Service, they poll farmers, they ask them, they contact them and say, how many cows are you milking and how much milk are you making? And that's where the USDA data comes from. And we love our farmers, but they'll say around 100 when it could be 90 or it could be 120. So the numbers are good for trends from USDA, but I wouldn't call them accurate down. Well, you can see it's 2.788 billion. It's not, that's a rounded number from USDA. It's not accurate down to the 1 pound. So this is USDA survey data that I'm showing here, not federal order data.
Diane, this is John. Is it fair to say that, or is it accurate to say you can only rely on these numbers because GFA and Agrimark and whoever else, for reasons of proprietary information, will not share how much milk they record being produced in Vermont?
I think they're going to come in and talk to you later today, and you can ask them that.
I will ask them.
There you go. That would be great.
But that's right. You don't have access to that info.
We do not have access to that information.
Thank you.
All right.
So do we know where that 2,602,000,000 pounds of milk went, Diane?
All right. That's previews of coming attractions. We have more we have more questions to answer for you, and they're coming. More
Okay.
slides. Yep. All right. So I'm going to hand this over to EB. She's going to talk about the dairy processors, and EB, just let me know when you want to change slides. The first one is up with the total processors by category.
Thanks, Diane. And just going to turn my video on real quick. I am on vacation and riding with family with the Jack Russell on my lap. So I will.
You might have hit the mute button, EB.
We lost you, EB.
Oh, is that better?
Yes.
We can hear you. Yes.
Okay. All right. So starting out with just a spread, these are processors. These are people that have a milk handler license. And included in this, we took out like milk truck companies are required to have a license, distributors, things like that. We took those that aren't processing out of the equation. So these are people listed in these ranges that will give you a breakdown of by size what is actually being processed. Diane, can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, so the first category has our largest amount of processors, and it's the 500 pounds or less category, which really equates to 5 to 10 cows, depending on how productive your cows are. And the people listed here range from cheese makers to ice cream makers, yogurt makers, all sorts of things. People that buy cheese from a processor and smoke it and do custom things like that. There's just a wide variety of products. In this category is where the large majority of some of our artisan award-winning cheesemakers exist. So these are individuals that are, for the most part, producing their own milk or buying small amounts and turning it into a value-added product. So Diane, you can go to the next slide. This next one, it's our second tier, which would equate to about 100 cows, give or take, a day in production. And these are processors that have definitely scaled up in size, more likely to have either adjacent farms that are owned, that are selling milk in, or neighboring farms brought in to those that strictly just process purchased milk. So you also have in this category fluid milk processors that do ice cream, butter, more diversity in managing market demands. You also have Ben & Jerry's that comes up frequently in discussions, and they are purchasing cream. So they are purchasing cream from another processor to make their products with. Next slide, please, Diane.
Before you go on, EB, on this slide right here before us, do you at the agency run any numbers on, I see you have Jasper Hill Farm way at the bottom, on what they buy milk in, I understand. You said some of these people are buying milk from neighboring farms. Do you have any records showing what they pay their farmers for milk that they buy from them?
They are not required to report in statute what they pay. They are required to put in their application either pounds produced per month at times or purchased. And that's so that if they need a bond that we can calculate that. And there's different ownership structures here. Jasper Hill has other farms, but they own them. They're just under a different LLC. So there's different diversity here in ownership structures and things like that.
So we have no way of knowing if this value added products that these folks are making, if they're paying more for their raw milk than say on the commodity market by the very large purchasers of milk.
That's correct. I know some things just in passing conversations, but it's really a proprietary conversation. And it's not a requirement for them in licensing with the agency to state what they're paying per month. So it would be a conversation directly to those processors that you all could ask, but it's not a requirement in statute for them to report to the agency.
Thank you.
EB, the 10,000 to 50,000 pounds per day slide is up.
Thank you, Diane. So this one's jumping up a good chunk, which you're now looking at someone that's processing milk from about 500 cows a day. And they're getting bigger and bigger. So these individuals here have a larger distribution chain. They're not just selling at farmers markets or in local distributors or like a local co-op. These are distributors that are in national chain stores, which requires different packaging and volume consistency. So the first two slides, there may be some in some national chain stores, but for the most part, they're selling at a farmer's market directly off the farm or through some local distributors throughout Vermont and maybe even into New Hampshire. These are ones that you would find in the Northeast throughout and in higher distribution chains. Go ahead, Diane. So here is a range of processors that it would basically be like 1,000 cows worth of milk, give or take a day. And here you have two that are purchasers of Vermont milk, and then one that is processing their own farm's milk and making it into fluid milk products and selling cream or other things like that. Go ahead, Diane. This next one, you're getting into people that are processing about 5,000 cows worth of milk potentially a day. And this is getting into a bigger scale. The previous slide just had HP Hood. That would be out of state HP Hood processing. And this one is the in-state plant in Barrie. So it's a fluid milk processor that's buying Vermont milk exclusively and distributing in certain gallon, half gallon sizes and different fat levels. You have Commonwealth with what they are making in yogurts that is distributed nationally. And then you also have Cabot here in different processing and distributions that they're doing. Go ahead, Diane. So this last slide for me, I think it's the last slide for me, is the largest category, which would be over 500,000 pounds, over 500,000 cows or more. There are some plants that may even be processing up to 1 million pounds of milk a day. They're very, very large plants making very different products, anywhere from cheeses that are going to age 6 months to 4 or 5 years to sour cream, cottage cheese, butter, and direct cream that they would sell to other manufacturers and into whey powders. So very, very different operations here, very large processors that are cranking through milk each day.
What's in the Land O'Lakes operation?
Yeah.
Where's that and what is that?
They are purchasing Vermont milk for butter and other products. So they are purchasing milk from Vermont that's going out of state to be processed.
So you might have an overlap that Agrimark is a cooperative and has their members' milk, and their members' milk would indicate that it's over 500,000 pounds a day. But that also these processing facilities have to license at their size and scale. So that same milk that Agrimark bought from the members goes into Agrimark Cabot. So it would not be prudent to say it's 500,000 pounds on each of these daily. The same milk that Agrimark has for members goes into Agrimark Cabot or Agrimark Middlebury. So it wouldn't be prudent to just say 500,000 pounds for each of these, especially the Agrimark, and then Land O'Lakes and Vermont Creamery. You gotta differentiate those as well. But these are licensed and they're touching milk in Vermont.
So is it Land O'Lakes member milk in Vermont that Land O'Lakes touches and then it's shipped out of state to be processed, to be manufactured or processed?
It would be a contract negotiated with the co-ops. And so Vermont milk going to a specific processing center outside of Vermont. So it's the co-ops negotiating and marketing their members' milk that's going to Land O'Lakes to be manufactured. There's a lot of dairy plants nationally that you will end up with co-packing. So there may be numerous companies making a product under one roof or under certain labels. And those are things negotiated with the co-ops to get their milk into these different plants. And so that's where Land O'Lakes comes in. There's a contract somewhere for Vermont milk going to a specific plant and they're making product out of it. So it's not necessarily a Land O'Lakes member in Vermont. It's just the co-op has a contract with them.
Okay. Those are all the processors by size and lots of names there. We'll send this presentation to you so you can digest it. The next slide has got a lot of data on it. Thank you, Evie. So the agency has to determine where the milk goes, where's the first touch point when it leaves the farm. And that is required for antibiotic testing. Who's responsible for testing that load of milk for antibiotics? So the data that we get says the milk was picked up by a truck and here's the first place it went. So that's all the data we get at the agency. We do not get the fact that the milk was separated into cream and skim and the skim went this way and the cream went that way. We don't get that data. We don't have that. So this is aggregate data for milk that leaves the farm and where's the first place it goes. So it's aggregate. It's arduous to get. So this is 1 month in the spring. We've done 1 month in the spring and 1 month in the fall in 2006, 2007, 2016, 2017, and of the request for the report that was sent to you in your legislative committee for January, we did the 2020. So we don't do it for the whole year. We don't do it for multiple years because it's an arduous process and the agency doesn't have a lot of use for it except to say, here's some numbers. So this is showing milk that left the farm and stayed in Vermont, highlighted in yellow. In 2000.
It stayed in Vermont, Diane?
You can see the different states that the milk went to, the first place it landed when it left the farm. So you can see all the New England states, there's New York and New Jersey listed, or that it had to be disposed of. Those are the information we have of where it went. So I've highlighted the Vermont that it stayed here and got processed. Can't tell you what it got made into specifically, but it stayed in Vermont.
John?
Sorry, thanks, Bobby. Diane, since there's a huge increase in the amount of milk dumped in 2020, am I right in thinking that is probably not because of antibiotic violations, but is because it was dumped because it couldn't be marketed?
Correct. This was a COVID impact of other processing facilities to be shut down. This is a month in the spring. I believe it was April. In April, with the pandemic hitting, processing facilities were closed and there was nowhere to go with the milk. All the plants were full in the cooperative infrastructure and there was nowhere else to go. So no, that was not due to antibiotics or overheating or truck tipping over or all those fun things that happen that cause milk to be dumped. So just seeing those numbers, it's been right around 60%, 60, 61%. for the majority of the years of milk staying in state to be processed. So about 100, this is 1 month's worth. So keep that in mind, that we're doing around 130 to 150,000 pounds a month in the spring into Vermont processing facilities. And there's a percent of the total is in the 60% range.
Which month is it, Diane?
It appears I did May in some years and April and others. So
April and May? Okay.
April and May, spring. Yep. And knowing that spring months are different than fall months. So tried to indicate, you know, we know there's a lot more milk in April and May on farms. And then the demand changes in September of, you know, where the milk goes. So using the same spring month, this is the product mix that the facility makes. So when I say it was skim condensed or cream, I can't tell you which of each, but that's where the milk was dropped off when it left the farm for the first time. So it's limited data, does not incorporate any data for on-farm processing, none. So this is only when it's trucked from a farm and where's the first place it landed. So cheese, fluid, and skim condensed and cream are the largest categories, but this is not exclusive to in-state. This is wherever it went, not just in-state, all those states that were listed. So fluid is still a fairly large portion, certainly changed from 2006 at 36% fluid and down to 29% fluid in 2020. So marked change there. Cheese has been pretty stable in the 20% range. And skim condensed cream right in that 20% range as well. I think the other interesting thing that I didn't highlight in yellow is the change for yogurt. 2.3 million pounds in 2006, 15 million pounds in 2016. Commonwealth came on board. And then some other yogurt makers started buying in milk, even the smallest ones in the state, a Butterworks, Yogurt City. There's a couple of really small ones in there that are buying milk from farms to make their product. But Commonwealth was the biggest reason for that jump in yogurt making.
But you said before, just to clarify, this is not utilization in Vermont. This is utilization of Vermont milk wherever it goes.
Wherever it went.
So out of state
Yep.
and in state both.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Correct.
Diane?
Yes.
Just thinking back to the big processors and look at these slides, do we know what percentage of milk comes from out of state to those big processors? I mean, I guess we could, okay.
No, we don't have that data.
And can we figure it out from how much Vermont milk goes to a Middlebury or Cabot?
No, not really. I mean, you can ask them. I think that's a good direct question for them, but this is truly very limited data of the milk got picked up at the farm. Where did it first go to be delivered? And that's it. And we do not get that data from New York State. The milk was picked up in New York State and ended up where? If it ended up in a Vermont plant, we do not get that data. New York State would get that data so they can say, oh, who was responsible for the antibiotic testing? But we don't get that data in Vermont.
So you have 2 months data of the milk coming in state from wherever it comes from by state. And then you have this data of where the milk goes, but
no, you're mixing it. We have the only data that we receive at the agency is Vermont milk when it was picked up by the truck and where it went and what was the first place it ended up at. We don't have any data about milk coming from any other state into our state.
Well, the first slide, the antibiotic shows the milk coming in.
Nope, that's milk going out. It left a farm and ended up at the first place it was delivered was Connecticut. Milk leaving Vermont, where's the first place it went? That's what this slide shows. Does that help, Danny?
So that's raw milk going out of state.
Yes. It was picked up at the farm. Where's the first place it was delivered to? Connecticut, Massachusetts, Maine, New Hampshire, New York, Rhode Island, a little bit in New Jersey, not a lot.
Yeah, so, yeah, that's very helpful. I mean, it's helpful. That's not milk coming in. That's both slides you've shown that are milk going out.
Correct.
Where,
Leaving.
where it goes and how it's used. Okay.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
They don't have, are we going to see milk coming in, or as John said, no, you don't
Nope.
have data on
We
milk
don't have that data.
But we know how much milk we produce in state, so you could subtract the 2020 pounds that are going out of state from what we produce, and you'd know how much is leaving the state. And then we could also take the number of pounds of product that's produced in Vermont and figure out how much milk's coming in from out of state into Vermont to make all the product.
Yeah, those would be estimates, but you certainly could. I mean,
Well,
we don't
give
have hard data on that. That's all.
So unless I'm mistaken, I believe the DFR report showed that the outcome of the calculation Bobby just did was that something on the order of 60% of the milk stays in state. Do you recall seeing that? And if so, do you know where that number came from?
From the slide that I just put back up on the screen,
Well,
that
that's the milk.
we gave them the data. So it ain't like they magically came up with it. The data came from us.
61.60.
That was for 2020, yes. Mhm. But that's only what we know about milk that went from the farm to a processor in Vermont. That's all we know.
Okay, so that's the basis of the DFR calculation.
Correct.
This raw by state data. Okay,
Correct. Mhm.
it's not plant. Okay,
But that, sorry, just to clarify for myself, Diane, that data, that 61.6% is not related to the final disposal of the dairy product that is manufactured. So, so that could end up, or probably ends up, or whatever, in dairy product that is sold out of state.
Correct. Yes. You should, when you talk to your, the other presenters today and the next time you meet, you should ask how much of the product that they produce leaves the state. Probably in a milk commission meeting 5 to 10 years ago, they spoke of, we make all this product, 95% of it leaves Vermont. So you should speak to the people that you're talking. It takes very little of our milk volume to feed Vermonters. It's somewhere between 7 and 15% of the Vermont's total milk volume makes every dairy product a Vermonter could ever want to eat. We make way more milk than we have people for, way more. So we need to process and go out the door.
I'm trying to eat more, Diane.
I know, I'm doing my best to. Anson, did you have something? Says you're admitted to the waiting room, Anson. I don't know what that means.
I don't know.
Okay. All right.
I'm still here.
All right.
Diana, I just have a follow-up. So the
Yep.
six, what is exactly reported on this slide to you that
To
says to the agency that says that this milk has was produced and stayed in Vermont? What is the does the plant notify you?
They provide us in federal order parlance, it's a 9C report or an Appendix N report. Appendix N in the pasteurized milk ordinance talks about antibiotic testing. So it's for us to know that if a farm had an antibiotic problem and spoiled a load of milk, we need to know where it went and who did the testing, because then we have to do follow-up and verification. So that's what we use it for. We don't really at the agency care that much about the pounds. We need to know where the milk went, so we can follow up on an antibiotic issue if that's the case.
So each licensed plant in the state, in the universe that EB went through, they each notify you the volume of milk and where that milk came from?
If they are buying in milk, yes. They now, for their pasteurized milk ordinance and on-farm processor milking the animals and making the product, they have to document that they tested for antibiotics before they process the milk into whatever product they're going to make. They have to keep those records at the farm, and it's part of our inspection, but they don't have to send those. AB, correct me if I'm wrong, they don't have to send that information to us.
Correct. You're spot on, Diane. Good job.
Just another question, if I can. This chart does not include cream, skim milk, or condensed skim milk. Are there statistics that at least will grossly show how much we're talking about there?
You would need to, I think the people that are speaking later today might be able to add light to that question.
Secondly, about milk that is processed on the farm are not in these numbers. Is that at all significant, or is it just de minimis?
It's really.
And is there a trend?
We certainly have more processors in that small category. When EB showed the slide of 82 processors that are less than 500 pounds of milk per day, they are very, very small, but they're in the majority. But they don't have a tremendous impact on total volume for the state. They're just very small. So yes, there are more of them, and they're making wonderful products and garnering many awards, but they're really not changing the needle substantially on total volume in Vermont. Okay, so my last slide is that we do not have data about milk coming in from other states into Vermont for processing. So we don't have access to any of that data. So I really don't have anything to say about that last question that you had.
But wouldn't that be an important number to have, to know if we're utilizing our own milk to make our own products here? And know if we're getting 20 truckloads of milk from out of state a day or not? I mean, how can we mark something Vermont milk, Vermont made products? If we want to build a niche market with Vermont as part of the name, I mean, it would be important to know how much milk is being brought in from someplace else, or if it's bumping our milk out and bumping it into, say, powder, because we don't have a market for it.
The current regulatory structure that we have doesn't allow or doesn't require that data. Maybe the regulatory structure within the definition of local might preclude that, but currently there's no regulatory authority to collect data that many of the processors may feel is proprietary. So we would either need a tremendous statute change to collect. There isn't a reason for the agency to collect that data for regulatory purposes. I don't know what is required in the local definition, if there's a requirement for those who choose to label proof, but it isn't that would be within the Attorney General's world more than the agency's world of collecting that data. So we don't have that data. Okay. Yeah. Positive. Now I'm gonna, if you any other questions, but I'll turn it over to Laura Ginsburg to bring it on home.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but it's a little after 10. Anson, are you still with us, or have you left?
I am still here. What I was going to do is I've got a farm visit I have to go to that's been delayed because of the pandemic. What I was hoping to do is I can hop in the car, maybe jump off for a minute, and I can hop in the car, and if cell service continues, I can join you from there.
Okay. I just want to make sure, Bobby, if you had your questions or you're set to let Anson go.
Well, I kind of wanted to know how much milk was being imported into Vermont, thinking that, you know, Diane or Laura would give us those numbers, but now we know we don't have those numbers, you know, and where our Vermont milk is being shipped to. We've got that record over on the side of where where that milk went. And, you know, we've noticed in the farm numbers, when we got that report, that the big guys, I mean, we keep saying the big guys, which really, if you get out of Vermont and measure them up, they aren't very big, but those numbers haven't creeped up dramatically, even though with the supply control that the co-ops put in place, we lost quite a few small farms because of the growth product that they put out to control the growth, encouraged the little guys to sell out to the big guys because they could take the quota from those cows with them. And it kind of did a disservice to our smaller farms in regards to, so somehow we got to figure out, well, where did those cows go? Are they still in Vermont? Did Vermont farmers buy them with the large farms, and those numbers went from, say, 1,200 per farm to 1,500 per farm? Because the farm numbers haven't grown, only 2 by 2. So, but we can get those numbers.
Bobby, let's let Anson go, and then we can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll join you. Okay.
Thank you, Anson.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye. All right.
Laura Ginsburg, I think it's our last slide.
Thanks, Diane. So glad to be here today. Just a quick introduction for those who I haven't had the opportunity to meet yet. I'm Laura Ginsburg. I'm the section chief of the development division at the agency, which is the non-regulatory division focused on business assistance and marketing. And I work with a team of staff specifically on marketing, market development, and business assistance in the channels of direct to consumer all the way through to international export. I also am the center lead for the Dairy Business Innovation Center, which is the program that Anson spoke about earlier. And we represent the 10 states from Pennsylvania to Maine with USDA support through a grant program. We've received about $6.5 million to date, and we'll be receiving about another $6 million this year. And that is really focused on market-driven and innovation-driven strategies to support the dairy sector. So I'm going to talk just about 3 high-level bullet points, all with specific examples underneath, as things that both the Agency of Agriculture through the Development Division and the other divisions are working on, and through the Dairy Business Innovation Center support. So first off is one thing that's really clear to help farmers earn more money from their milk production is to decrease the cost of production. So that's a clear, easy way for a farmer to get more out of their milk check is if it costs them less to produce the milk to start with. So the Dairy Innovation Center funded a grazing contract through UVM Extension and Cheryl Cesario, where she's working with 5 farms in the Rutland, South Addison area. All of them are smaller scale conventional farms, roughly averaging about 80 cows. All of them either just starting to think about grazing or in the first year or 2 of grazing some or all of their herd. The program that we're offering is meant to be flexible for the farm, and Cheryl goes out and provides direct technical assistance to each farm, plus cohorts. So the groups, the farms as a group meet together to learn from each other and develop those educational and social connections on how to change management strategies. So Cleveland Farm, Scott Cleveland, they're an 80 cow conventional farm. They have just switched to grazing. They were seeding down one of their major cornfields in 2018. In 2019, Cheryl met with them, and then 2020, they launched the grazing work with Cheryl's really close and excellent technical assistance. So I would just remind folks that it was pretty dry last year. So there was a number of challenges, but because we were able to provide that direct technical support, Scott Cleveland was able to make transitions throughout the year and found that over 25 weeks, he saved $34,000 in feed costs. And he also noted that he had reduced animal healthcare related expenses, especially with hoof health. And one of the quotes that he supplied was that he's very pleased with how this went and that he should have done this 10 years ago. So if we can save a farm $34,000 over a period of months in their first season of grazing transition, that is a huge opportunity for us to look at other ways that we can decrease the cost of production. One of the comments that we also usually hear is that cows don't produce as much milk during this period. Scott Cleveland found that his average milk production was maintained at 65 pounds per cow. So he's producing roughly the same amount of milk. It's costing him significantly less to do that, allowing him to pay down debt or invest in infrastructure or equipment as needed. So we've got the 5 farms that are working with Cheryl now, and we just supported another cohort on the Connecticut watershed side. So that's an exciting way that we can decrease the cost of production. I think Heather could talk to you about a number of other ways where if you're increasing the quality and quantity of homegrown forages, you're going to significantly impact cost of production while also decreasing nutrient output. So there's a number of ways that we can approach this. I don't want people to walk away saying, well, everybody has to graze all their cows. That's the only way we can decrease cost of production. There's no one size fits all strategy here, but meeting the farmer where they're at with that dedicated technical assistance over a long term. So these cohort farms get 2 years of technical assistance, provides real and lasting value as they learn a new management strategy.
Laura, can I ask a question? I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, feel free to interrupt.
Thanks. So there, you said there's 4 farms now, and they have 2 years of this technical assistance. So what's the plan within the Innovative Center to expand this out? Do you have something beyond? Are you going to go to 10 farms and 3 more people, or what's the plan?
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
Great question. So this Cheryl's round was what we call the pilot round. So it was meant to be small. The contract, so just to put like a dollar amount towards it, we are paying UVM $45,000 for 2 years worth of her time doing the one-on-one and group technical assistance, farm visits, and providing them with resources. We opened up a round this spring to take on additional contracted service providers that organize and lead the cohorts, and we funded 2 of them. One being the White River Natural Resource Conservation District, that's going to have farms in Vermont and New Hampshire, and the other one is in Pennsylvania, supporting farms in Pennsylvania and New York. We're going to open up another round for contracts this fall, and we put $800,000 towards this kind of technical assistance in the Dairy Innovation Center funding, knowing that this is a real opportunity for us to both support farms in decreasing cost of production and improve consumer just value and preferences for products that are coming out of this region. So the second thing that we can do is to increase the value of milk produced. So we know that all co-ops pay more for quality and higher components. That's all farm scales. So if you are producing milk with lower somatic cell counts, higher butterfat, you're going to be paid more than your neighbor farmer, for instance, who may have a higher somatic cell count, lower butterfat milk shipping to the same co-op. So if we can support farmers in producing milk that is of that higher quality standing and has those higher component levels, then we're going to increase the value that the farmer gets. We can do that through a number of ways. Providing that technical assistance, again, is one really clear way where a farmer can ask questions and get information back about specific strategies that they can do. It may be simply that they need to clean their equipment more often, and that will decrease the somatic cell or PI counts that their milk is getting dinged for and increase their pay price. Or it could be that they need a different management strategy for their herd health. So there's pretty clear ways that we can support farms in doing that. The other thing that we can do to increase the value of the milk produced is to create higher value relationships for farms for a portion or 100% of the milk that they produce. And this goes back to a question that Senator Starr asked earlier about if we know how much those farms that ship to Jasper Hill or Springbrook or some of the other cheesemakers or value-added producers are making outside of the co-op structure. And what I have heard anecdotally across a number of producers is that average is about $30 a hundredweight for conventional milk. That milk is often produced with specific quality or production guidelines, like no fermented feeds or really low somatic cell counts, just given that maybe it's going into a raw milk aged cheese or a kind of cheese that doesn't agree with the kinds of bacteria that live in fermented feeds. But that gets the farmer, a conventional farmer, $10 more or more than $10 per hundredweight for their production. And we've seen that across the board. So we're not saying, again, I don't want to say that every farm is going to want to ship to a specialty cheesemaker and do those things, but that is an opportunity for some farms to create more value for their milk. The third thing that we can do is build consumption and consumer preferences of Vermont produced products.
Laura, sorry to interrupt, but just to go back, and this may not be a fair question for you, but do you have any indication whether small cheesemakers could expand production, but are limited by investment, opportunities, ways to get money? I mean, do you have any indication whether there is an untapped market for these small producers? Or is it, was last year so confusing that you can't really tell?
That's a great question, John, and I definitely appreciate it. What I have heard is that many of the smaller producers are also milking their own cows. So they're balancing the farm responsibilities and the creamery responsibilities. Maybe they have one part-time or full-time employee. There's a particular creamery that I'm thinking of that wants to expand. They currently are only making products 2 or 3 times a week. They are an on-farm creamery sourcing milk from their own herd of 200 or 300 cows. So they have the milk production to support 7-day-a-week processing if they were able to sell more. What they need is additional market share. So they need to invest in their branding and their outreach. And they participated in a project that we did last fall, supported by Vermont Dairy Promotion Council dollars, where we did a virtual buyer's mission. So they were introduced to buyers across the country, and those buyers were able to taste and reflect upon and talk to the cheesemaker directly to say, this is what we'd like to see in your product. We're interested in buying it. We'd like you to do A, B, and C to become more competitive in the market. And that's a real opportunity for investment and something that the Innovation Center and Working Lands are excited about and currently funding. So I'll talk about one project that we funded last year. This is with Jasper Hill. So this is just an example project of what a $25,000 investment can do. And this was specifically for marketing and brand strategy as a response to COVID decreased institutional and wholesale sales. So we were able to support them in a marketing strategy campaign. And just remember that Jasper Hill, they are sourcing milk from their own farms. They work with a number of other farms, all who are small to medium sized, producing a variety of cheeses, some of which they make, some of which they buy in and age for others, like Cabot or Skolton Family Farm. And they've also supported other businesses in starting their own creameries, like 5 Generations, who now is making their own cheese and selling it and purchasing additional milk from other farms. So they're a real impactor in the success of the dairy community here. So we gave them a grant for $25,000. They matched it with some funds, and they were able to increase 4-fold their revenue in 2020, which is pretty amazing considering the market impacts that happened, to over $3 million in e-commerce sales. So they went from virtually no e-commerce sales to over 3 million in sales. And their social media, which is one of the most important strategies that a business can do, had a media reach of over 1 billion with a social reach. So that's on Instagram or Facebook specifically, people interacting with posts that they put up of over 39 million between May and December. So if you think about the level of impact that that dollar has had, that is less than a penny, way less than a penny per person reached. And being really consumer forward and market focused on how we're investing our dollars is going to allow those small brands to grow into big brands and to grow into the place where they are making an impact on how much milk is used. And when you think about Wisconsin and California, the states that we compete with in the value added sphere, they're coming in with dairy promotion dollars, 50 million, $60 million a year. And so they're able to pump a lot of money into the consumer and market side of things. We don't have that kind of funding, but we have better stories and we have better producers who win more awards. And so thinking about how we can compete is probably the most important factor in how we're spending the Dairy Innovation Center dollars and the Working Lands dollars to ensure that we're always looking at what consumers are wanting and how we can assist farmers in getting there in the production of their milk.
Heather?
Great, thank you. Laura, I was wondering, do we know, you sort of mentioned like cheesemakers being able to build their business and brand recognition and take in more milk, et cetera. Do we know that's what cheesemakers want? So that may be our desire, that we grow that part of the dairy sector, but I'm just wondering, have we, I guess, surveyed, cheesemakers to understand where they want to grow? Do we know that? Because we may be making an assumption that's not correct, I guess.
What I've heard directly from cheesemakers is a balance between the two. Some people just want to make cheese at the level that they're at. They're fine with it. It works for their business scale, and their personal and professional goals. And that's where they want to stay. And that we support that. There are other cheesemakers who are looking to grow either the number of products that they make or their market share. And they have a goal of sourcing milk from other farms, or they have a goal of using all of their farm's production in their products. And they need support in getting there through marketing or distribution assistance or processing flow. So I think it's a combination of products and desires based on the particular business. The most common concern that I hear right now from value-added producers, whether it's cheese or caramel or ice cream, but specifically cheese, because when you age cheese for a long time and you're making these specialty products, the quality and components of the milk are really, really critical, is that they are having trouble sourcing enough milk that meets their standards within the state of Vermont. And so that's becoming a real concern for them, is that they may want to grow, but they can't find enough milk or get it hauled to them, even if they can find it, because of the way shipping routes are laid out and the way that the co-ops need milk to move around to support their own processing needs. And they can't find enough people to work for them. So I would say that it's not so much of not wanting to grow as more of not having the support pieces in place to be able to realize that vision.
Yeah, I think these are really important points that you're bringing up because, I guess identifying some low-hanging fruit would be important for us to, be moving forward on. If there really is this reality that there's a cheesemaker that needs, or 20 cheesemakers that need X, more gallons of milk, and the barrier is X, is that something that we can overcome, but we just didn't know about, so we weren't able to help. So thanks. Thank you for
Bob, you got your hand up. We've chewed pretty far into our break, so go ahead, but we ought to, Catherine is going to come on at 10:30, so go ahead, Bobby.
Yeah, I'm wondering, Laura, with your innovation center, have you looked into what's going on over in New York State at Upstate Cooperative about splitting milk up into different products? And I understand they're doing very well at Upstate is at that plant. by new innovative, doing new and innovative things. And I was wondering if the center could look at something like that for Vermont to do, because it sounds like they're doing pretty well there.
That's a great point. And I think what we see is that when you can differentiate your milk and sell products that are through a separated and distinct supply chain, you do increase that market and marketability of the products that are coming out of it. So I'll take a closer look there. We do have great partners in New York, in Pennsylvania, some of whom ship to grass-fed lines of products in particular that are seeing real growth. So it's a lot of interesting and compelling work happening across the region.
But you haven't looked into that yet.
I've not been in touch directly with Upstate. I'm familiar with their strategy and product differentiation.
See, I mean, I think Vermont, we've done a great job diversifying our farms. You know, years back, our milk all went to Mass and Connecticut, and now we're keeping it home to make these wonderful products with, but the money isn't trickling down to our farmers. And we hear some farmers are getting $30, $100 selling their milk to a little small cheesemaker, but yet our farmers are sending their milk to wherever for 17 or 18. But anyways, that's what we're here for, is to try to figure that all out. Thanks a lot.
Does any other task force members have questions for anybody from the agency, or should we take a 5-minute break before we hear from Catherine and Agrimark? John.
Just quickly, Laura, if you could speak to the opportunities of and challenges. I was just thinking of what we could call, I guess, captive markets, for example, like schools. And I know the USDA and the FDA get involved, but, you know, if we could have our students start drinking, you know, whole chocolate milk again, does that make a big difference? Or state governments are usually the biggest employers in any given state, prisons, things like that. Is there opportunity there?
Definitely for the prisons population, because the state has control over what that food supply chain looks like. When we're talking about public schools, that is overseen by the federal government. And so like things like whole fat milk, we have no control over unless it's a private school. We do work closely with schools to encourage them to source local if they can. There are service problems with, you know, getting kids milk in cups. The processors here in Vermont don't put milk into cartons at that large of a scale. So there are some significant issues there. Also, the price point that schools can pay for food is a real issue that our processors and our farms would not benefit from. It would actually be quite an economic downturn for them to supply that market because of the price of milk. The correctional facilities, we did work with the women's facility to move from powdered milk to fluid milk because their prison population was drinking powdered milk. That is just a cost issue for how much they're allocated to spend on food if they can source Vermont fluid milk at all, or if they're getting a powdered product that's then being reconstituted and served.
So the US, is it the USDA or FDA, when they put out contracts for our public schools, they're looking for the absolute cheapest milk they can find?
2%.
Yeah, so they have to source the low, I think it's 1% is what kids get. And there are pretty strict sourcing guidelines that schools have to follow when they put out those bids and serve the product. So they have to find product that meets both the price point and the nutritional standards, which puts it into a very hard to meet space in the market, particularly when you're talking about buying Vermont sourced milk, because our processors, first of all, don't make that product that can be served in the way, like in the little cartons, but also just because the price point is so low, and schools just don't have enough money to switch. If they do, like a lot of the private schools may be sourcing milk from Vermont, but they may serve it out of the dispensers where kids can fill up their own cups, or out of jugs because they can fill it up, or they can afford to get plastic bottles of milk. So it's just a different approach. And it's really, I would say, mainly based on budgetary considerations.
And to add to that, the population is truly small. We did some work up in the Newport area once that the local farms wanted to supply the school with their milk. They wanted to process it and have it for the school. And when we got the farmers around the table in the room and started talking about the volume, one of the large farms made 3 times the amount of milk they would need for the whole school year. One farm. So the volume, it's important volume, but it's not moving the needle much. So we want to keep it in the state. We want to feed all local products as much as we can, but it's not, we just don't have any people comparatively to south of us. That's where the bigger markets are. So Vermont's great. We got wonderful people, but we just don't have enough of them.
Thank you, Diane. So we're to the point of hearing from Catherine. I'd like to suggest we take a 5-minute break. And if that's all right with you, Leon and Kirsten, we'll take a little of your time and run into your time a little bit and hear from Catherine. Is that okay all around?
That works.
5 minutes.
Does that sound good for everybody?